Okay, we're doing that. This is Guy P. Harrison's 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God. Chapter 3. What's up, bro? Faith is a good thing. While some believers attempt to produce evidence to support claims of their God's existence, others simply declare that faith is good enough and leave it at that. In this context, faith is believed in a God, but faith is belief in a God that is secure and unconcerned with logic or reason. It's important to separate faith that a God exists from the kind of faith one has in a friend or family member. The latter describes a form of trust that is based on past experiences and loyalties to people who obviously exist. Faith in a God's existence also is very different from having faith that the sun will rise tomorrow morning. The latter is a prediction based on previous observations and knowledge about the solar system. Some believers merge or seamlessly switch back and forth between these meanings during conversations about their God, but they're not the same. Yes, I have faith in many things too, but not in the existence of gods, because there is nothing to base that faith upon. I have faith in my children, for example, meaning I think they are good kids and will do the right thing in most situations. But I don't have faith that they exist because I don't need to. I know that they exist because I have seen them, heard them, and felt the biting sting of their little kicks and punches when we played Roman gladiators. Hold on. I'm waiting on the weed, man, goddammit. Lil P! Fuck. Anyway, where were we? Many believers are not shy about declaring that they know their God is real simply because they believe it so strongly. According to them, faith means believing in a God even though there is no reason to believe in a God. It sounds silly when put like that, but that's what faith is. It is believing without reason. Despite the hype, this is not a very good justification for believing in a God or anything else. A big problem with faith is figuring out where one should apply it. How does a believer justify picking one God over another if faith works for the existence of any God? Why, for example, is faith in the existence of Allah or Ganesha more or less valid than faith in the existence of Jesus? Faith that a God is real has nothing to do with evidence or reason. Therefore, it can be directed with equal force toward any God. Yet, for some reason, Muslims I have spoken to about this have little or no respect for the faith that confirms the reality of Jesus as a God to Christians. To Muslims, this is a mistake, an error in judgment. Faith is not a good answer for them. But then, Christians tell me that the faith Muslims have in Allah's existence is not the same as their faith. How they know this is a mystery. There are people in the world today who believe that fairies are real. Don't laugh. According to the Skeptics Dictionary, belief in fairies seems common in rural peoples around the world. Many of these people probably base their conclusions about fairies on faith. It must be faith because, to my knowledge, no one has produced any genuine fairy fossils or little fairy footprints. Who needs evidence or good reasons to believe when you have faith? Probably most believers in a God, I hope, would agree with me that fairies are not real. But how did they come to the conclusion that there are no little winged people buzzing around in gardens? How can faithful God believers so easily dismiss the faith of fairy believers? Is fairy faith significantly different from God faith? And if it is, how so? Having lived most of my life in societies that are dominated by Christian believers, I've heard many times that I just need to have faith that Jesus is real. Believers have told me that all I have to do is stop all my obsessing about evidence and, quote, just believe, unquote, that he is real. But if faith works for Jesus, why won't it work for fairies or Odin? Shouldn't every person who defends faith as a legitimate reason to conclude that their God is real also respect faith when it comes to the existence of thousands of other gods? I mean, what's the difference? But if one can have faith in the existence of just about anything, then faith would seem to be of no value at all for getting to the truth. Probably nothing frustrates non-believers more than the concept of faith. To many atheists, the believer's reliance on faith seems like a complete surrender of the mind, or at least a stubborn reluctance to think. Non-believers may scoff at faith, but they should never underestimate it. Faith can be like an impenetrable wall that stands firm against any and all challenges from skeptics. No matter how thoroughly devastating arguments against belief may be, faith usually prevails. It is obvious why this is the case. Arguments based on reason and reality are not likely to have much of an impact on a concept that has nothing to do with reason and reality. Atheists who hope to encourage critical thinking about belief should probably forget about arguing directly against faith. Faith doesn't lose debates because it doesn't play by the rules. It is perhaps more productive to simply encourage believers to think more about the concept of faith itself. It's more likely that believers will challenge their concept of faith first and maybe the existence of their God later. It is not impossible for believers to recognize that faith is an empty justification for belief. After all, most God believers already reject fairy faith and the faith that props up all those rival gods, remember? Most believers recognize how intellectually feeble faith is when they see it applied to anything other than their God. If it sinks in that faith is belief without a reason, some religious people may see that relying on it as a primary justification for belief in a God is just not good enough. Believers might also consider that retreating to the faith defense looks a lot like admitting that they can't make a good case for believing in their dumbass fucking God. Isn't this what believers who stress faith above reason and evidence are really saying? Isn't it a sort of confession that their belief is based on nothing substantial? Philosopher Daniel C. Dennett thinks so. Speaking of which, rest in peace, Daniel. Philosopher Daniel C. Dennett had recently died within the past week, so I just want to mention that because he was quite an influential figure. Anyway, back to the book. He suspects, Daniel that is, that the constant talk we hear about faith reveals deep insecurities among believers. In his book, Breaking the Spell, Dennett compares the attitudes of people in contrasting belief systems. Those who practice a folk religion don't think of themselves as practicing a religion at all. Their quote unquote religious practices are a seamless part of their practical lives, alongside their hunting and gathering or tilling and harvesting. And one way to tell that they really believe in the deities to which they make their sacrifices is that they aren't forever talking about how much they believe in their deities, any more than you or I go around assuring each other that we believe in germs and atoms. Where there is no ambient doubt to speak of, there is no need to speak of faith. It fascinates me that believers have made faith in a God's existence into an admired and respected concept. Some people brag endlessly about their great faith in a God, never once considering that giving up on their mind's ability to weigh evidence and analyze arguments may not be such a good thing. I cannot imagine how it can ever be right to default to faith when considering such an unusual claim. For example, I have an interest in space exploration and in the SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. While I do not know if there is life somewhere else in the universe, I think there's a very good chance that there is. I also think that at least a few planets out there probably have intelligent life on them. I hope that we discover extraterrestrial life in my lifetime. It would be a tremendously exciting moment in history and could shed a lot more light on our own origins and evolution. If we make contact with intelligent life, assuming that they don't exterminate us, I would be so excited that I probably wouldn't sleep for a week. Eager and hopeful as I may be about alien life, however, I could never take the leap of faith and pretend that I know for a fact that they exist. It just wouldn't feel right. I would know deep down that I was lying. I would be counterfeiting my hope, pretending to know something I did not. I might be able to talk for hours about my quote unquote strong faith in extraterrestrial civilizations, but I'm pretty sure that I would feel guilty about it later. Faith sounds a lot like cheating. It's jumping ahead to the conclusion before you have a right to, before it has been earned by discovery and thinking. Maybe gods really do exist, but shouldn't we wait until we discover convincing evidence before we say we know? Dan Barker, a Christian preacher who became an atheist, once pushed the concept of faith to thousands of believers. Today, however, he finds it difficult to believe that it used to make sense to him. Baker's personal journey to religion and back is fascinating. He was a devout believer who dedicated his life to converting others to Christianity and strengthening their belief in Jesus. Faith worked well for him until he started to question it. But once he admitted that it was a hollow justification for belief in a God, he had no choice but to let go. Faith is a cop-out, Barker writes in his book, Losing Faith in Faith, in which he says, if the only way you can accept an assertion is by faith, then you are conceding that it can't be taken on its own merits. It is intellectual bankruptcy. With faith, you don't have to put any work into proving your case. You can, quote unquote, just believe. Truth does not have to be believed. Scientists do not join hands every Sunday morning singing, yay, gravity is real. I will have faith. I believe in my heart that what goes up must come down, down, down. Amen. If they did, we would think they were pretty insecure about it. Dennett and Barker are right on the mark. The prominence of the faith concept betrays the believer's own doubts about their gods. But not only is faith intellectually lazy for the individual, it might also be harmful to society. It cannot be a good idea in modern times for millions of people to think it is okay to make decisions based on faith rather than reasoning. If anything, faith, which is accepting claims without evidence, should be strongly discouraged. I don't want my hospital staff or police department or fire service and governmental representatives making decisions based on faith. I want them to base their decisions on something more substantial, such as logic, data, facts, past experience, and science, don't you? To better understand the weakness of the faith concept, imagine if atheists tried using faith to support the idea that gods do not exist. How would that sound to the ears of believers? Barker writes, suppose an atheist refusing to look at any religious claims were to say, you must have faith that there is no God. If you believe in your heart that nothing transcends nature and that humanity is the highest judge of morality, then you will know that atheism is true. Wouldn't the Christians and followers of other religions snicker? Believers who are reluctant to let go of the faith concept might consider that there is no logical end to it. Faith doesn't stop at fairies and rival gods. Once it is accepted as a means of determining what is real and what is not, it can creep into many other areas of life. If, for example, one sees no problem with having faith that an undetectable God is real, why should that person refuse to have faith in astrology or psychic readings and all that other nonsense? What's the difference? In fact, it might be easier. I mean, after all, unlike gods, one can actually see stars in physics. There is no credible evidence that an alien spaceship has ever visited the Earth, but faith can make it so, if only in our minds. Just have faith, and eureka, we're not alone. The UFOs are here. Where does it end? Sadly, of course, for some people, there is no limit to the application of faith, and they really do believe virtually every wild claim that comes along. Billions of dollars are made off such people by armies of heartless quacks and con artists. I'm reluctant to quote Richard Dawkins, the prominent scientist, author, and atheist activist. I know that the mere mention of his name sends irritating shivers up the spines of some believers. But he's too brilliant and too relevant to leave out of any discussion about faith. In his book, The God Delusion, Dawkins argues that religion should never be imposed on young children because they may not yet be capable of sufficiently high levels of critical thinking. He especially despises use of the faith concept to convince children that gods are real and ancient holy books true. He says, quote, "Faith is an evil precisely because it requires no justification and brooks no argument. Teaching children that unquestioned faith is a virtue primes them, given certain other ingredients that are not hard to come by, to grow up into potentially lethal weapons for future jihads or crusades. Immunized against fear by the promise of a martyr's paradise, the authentic faith head deserves a high place in the history of armaments alongside the longbow, the warhorse, the tank, and the cluster bomb. If children were taught to question and think through their beliefs, instead of being taught the superior virtue of faith without question, it is a good bet that there would be no suicide bombers. Suicide bombers do what they do because they really believe that what they were taught in their religious books was true, that duty to God exceeds all other priorities, and that martyrdom in his service will be rewarded in the gardens of paradise. And they were taught that lesson, not necessarily by extremist fanatics, but by decent, gentle, mainstream religious instructors who lined them up in their mattresses, sitting in rows, rhythmically nodding their innocent little heads up and down while they learned every word of the holy book like demented parrots. Faith can be very, very dangerous, and deliberately to implant it into the vulnerable mind of an innocent child is grievously wrong. Dawkins is right, of course, but it has been my experience that most believers do not recognize any link between themselves and believers who would kill innocent people in the name of a God. They dismiss such people as fanatics or extremists and deny that they share the common foundation of the faith concept. But of course they do. If faith is the willing abandonment of reason, then it's not much of a stretch to imagine people doing just about anything in faith's name. History shows how easy it is to lead faithful people down terrible paths. But consider how difficult it would be to recruit me or most non-believers to become assassins, crusaders, or suicide bombers for a god. It just wouldn't work because someone first would have to show convincing evidence of an afterlife in heaven, as well as proof that the particular god exists in the first fucking place. Imagine if all those men who hijacked those planes the morning of September 11th, 2001, had rethought their worldview the night before. What if they had decided to question their faith in the God who they saw as the ultimate justification for their mission? What if they had rejected faith and instead asked for evidence? While it may seem unlikely for a believer who is firmly entrenched in faith to ever readjust their view and begin to ask for evidence, it's not impossible. Millions of people around the world have turned away from believing in gods. They were led to believe in a God by their parents and their society, but eventually found the courage to think their way free of faith. It may take some time, but it does happen. Once believers take an honest look at faith, there's a chance that they will see that it makes no sense. Believing in what there is no reason to believe is simply not a justifiable position, especially for anyone who thinks highly of truth and reality. Author Michael Shermer was once a born-again Christian. Empowered by faith, he was confident that he knew the ultimate truth of the universe. Today, however, he is a non-believer who preaches science and reason. He founded the Skeptics Society, publishes the excellent magazine Skeptic, and has written several popular science books. In the Science of Good and Evil, Shermer describes his journey from believer to non-believer. He says, quote, "I have been asked countless times how and why I lost my faith. Although my conversion to Christianity was sudden and dramatic, my deconversion was gradual and evolutionary. The scales did not suddenly fall from my eyes. Rather, there was a slow but systematic displacement of one worldview and way of thinking by another. Genesis and Exodus myths by cosmology and evolution theories, faith by reason, final truths by provisional probabilities, trust by verification, authority by empiricism, and religious supernaturalism by scientific naturalism. Faith cannot be argued away if a believer will not first consider its underlying weakness. Faith is unlikely to be defeated by an essay, a book, or a debate. As with Shermer's deconversion, faith is best eroded from within. Scientific facts and reasoned arguments from outside sources can help, of course, but the real battle is fought in the heart of the believer. They must decide to let go of faith all by themselves. Nobody can do it for them. Look, what are y'all doing? Rosie, what are you doing? Don't come sit on my lap. I am not in the mood. I'm in the middle of reading. And now we're on chapter 4. That got her going. Chapter 4, archaeological discoveries prove that my God exists. Archaeology and paleontology have always fascinated me. I can remember as a young child carefully excavating old Coke bottles and fish skeletons from my muddy riverbanks in Florida while my father fished nearby. I always made sure to extract my treasures up from the earth with delicate precision, just like the real archaeologists I saw in television documentaries. It's an exciting process to find, then hold an artifact in your hand and try to imagine it as it was before time claimed it. As an adult, I was able to relive those childhood memories by volunteering with an archaeological project in the Caribbean. Touching an object that was last held by people who lived centuries ago is the closest thing to time travel. It's a real thrill, but archaeology is no mere hobby. It's an invaluable science that offers a way for us to learn about our past. If we only had historical documents to go by, we would know much less about who we are and where we came from. In many cases, only archaeology can dig up the truth. So when somebody has archaeological evidence to support his or her claims, I tend to listen. Unfortunately, I have learned over the years that archaeology's good name has been hijacked by some believers who bend the truth. Some believers claim that archaeology has proven their God's existence. That's a bold claim, but they do make it. This is great that some believers are willing to let science have a say on the issue of their God's existence. The problem for them, however, is that archaeology offers no evidence for the existence of any gods. Many thousands of excavations have been conducted all over the world, and not one single artifact has ever been found that is direct evidence of even one god. The only thing that archaeologists keep finding is evidence that humans believe in gods. Biblical archaeology is an industry unto itself today, generating professional societies, clubs, books, magazines, websites, documentaries, and even archaeology-themed tours to the Holy Land. Searching for one's God in the sands of the ancient past, it seems, is irresistible to many believers. The truth is, however, most of the world's professional archaeologists don't think much of anyone in the world, in their field, who tries to match evidence to a foregone conclusion that is not open to revision. Archaeology is a science, and as such, it has an obligation to accept the evidence, no matter if it supports something in a holy book or not. I'm not suggesting that all religion-motivated archaeologists are unethical or incompetent, but there can be problems when one sincerely believes that they are digging for a god. Despite the glaring absence of a single discovery to substantiate the existence of any gods, some believers insist that archaeology has confirmed their claims. I have once interviewed a Mormon for a feature article on his religion, for example, and he said he believed the claims made by Joseph Smith were all true, based largely on archaeological evidence. For those who don't know, Joseph Smith is the founder of the Mormon religion, also known as the Church of Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ. While living in the state of New York in the early 1820s, Joseph Smith said he was led by an angel named Moroni to golden tablets. He said he translated the tablets with a seer stone, aka a crystal, and looking through his hat. The translation became the Book of Mormon, the central document for the religion that has now some 10 million members. The tablets have never been found. Although the story of Joseph Smith seems unlikely, my interview subject confidently told me that he believes it without hesitation. He explained that he does not need to rely upon faith to believe in the cave, the golden tablets, and the Book of Mormon, because archaeological discoveries have confirmed it to all be true. The fact is, however, no archaeologist has ever found anything that confirms any of the supernatural claims in the Book of Mormon. Many Muslims, Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and Hindus make the same claims about their beliefs. It would seem that archaeology has discovered gods many times over, but has it really? Believers who claim that archaeology has revealed hard evidence for the existence of their God are mistaken. No archaeological discovery has ever proved anything supernatural. There has never been any find made anywhere that ever provided evidence for the existence of one god, one miracle, one angel, one genie, or one demon. It's true, despite all the hype and all the claims by believers, not one artifact among millions discovered to date points to the existence of a god. So what are all these believers talking about? I don't think that they're lying, and I don't think that they're stupid. More likely, they've been misled by overly eager people who are desperate to show the world that their religion is the true one. In the cases that are not outright frauds, what generally happens is that somebody will find a site or an artifact that loosely corresponds with a story within a belief system, but still offers no evidence of a god or anything supernatural. Then a misleading news report written by a biased or incompetent journalist is published exaggerating the significance of the find. Believers, perhaps short on skeptical skill to begin with, gobble it up enthusiastically and proceed to repeat the bogus claim to anyone who will listen. I often end Archaeology Proves My God conversations with believers simply by asking them to name the most impressive archaeological discovery that proves their God is real. Silence usually follows. Some Jews and Christians will say the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I have seen the Dead Sea Scrolls on display at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. To me, they look like documents that were produced by people, not gods. They do not float in the air or glow magically. They are words on parchment. Nothing supernatural about them from what I could see. So then I ask believers how ancient writings prove anything other than ancient people knew how to write. Believers usually respond to that with the claim that they contain prophecies that came true. Of course, that doesn't lead anywhere either. Where the fuck is this weed dude? Anyway, where was I? The bottom line is that if there was just one example of archaeological evidence that confirmed the existence of a God beyond a reasonable doubt, don't you think we would have heard about it? Wouldn't it be a big deal and stick around longer than one news cycle? Wouldn't the archaeologists who found it be a household name? But none of this has happened because archaeology so far has nothing to say on the question of whether or not gods exist. Unfortunately, some believers can be stubborn about their quote-unquote evidence. For them, more reasonable and down-to-earth explanations are not enough to change their minds. This is what we see with the case of the Shroud of Turin, cited by many believers as proof that Jesus was a god. This 14-foot burial cloth contains the haunting image of a man's face that is seemingly burned into its fabric. It is housed today in Turin, Italy, at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. This cloth was not dug up by archaeologists, but archaeological techniques have been used to analyze it. Is the shroud really evidence of a god? Skeptics say no. Radiocarbon dating places the cloth's origin in the Middle Ages, not 2,000 years ago when Jesus was believed to have been executed. They also suggest that a more likely explanation is that the cloth was a forgery created to excite the faithful and extract money from pilgrims, a common practice in Europe at the time. The important point about the Shroud of Turin controversy is that some believers see it as an archaeological proof that Jesus was a god. They cite it as if science has confirmed the claim, but clearly the shroud is not proof of anything at this time. A common error some believers make when it comes to archaeology is to overreach with an artifact's significance. It would take a very special find to prove a god is real. For example, if the Shroud of Turin had Jesus' name embroidered on it, had been found in a Jerusalem tomb that was sealed for 2,000 years and radiocarbon dating confirmed its age, it would still not prove that Jesus was a god. It would be like discovering golden tablets in a cave in New York today. Even if they were shown to be authentic and somehow linked to Joseph Smith, it would not prove that any supernatural claims inscribed on them are true. Believers who like to stretch archaeological artifacts to obtain maximum mileage for their religion might ask themselves why the spectacular and numerous archaeological discoveries made in Egypt failed to convince them that the pharaohs were gods, as was claimed during their reign. A 450-foot pyramid that once entombed a god is at least as impressive as a burial cloth with a face imprint, isn't it? I've been deep inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu, spent days walking around Karnak, and breathed the musty air inside several royal tombs. Impressive? Yes. Evidence that gods, not men, ruled ancient Egypt? Not even close. There are many examples of exaggerated evidence. The ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah may have been burned to the ground, but this alone does not confirm that a god lit the fire, as some say. Archaeologists may have found remains of what were once the walls around a community named Jericho, but so what? The confirmed existence of a place that is mentioned in an ancient story does not mean the magical claims within the story are true. Stones that were once part of a wall are not evidence that anything supernatural ever happened there. After all, there are stories of gods running around ancient Greece too. Do archaeological excavations of places named in those stories prove that Zeus and Athena are real? Fuck out of here. Of course not. When people write down their myths, it's not unusual for them to use familiar settings, real places. But this is not a reason to conclude that the entire story is true. The idea that archaeology supports religious claims reminds me of those lost city of Atlantis found reports that show up in the news on a regular basis. It seems like every year, some guy with scuba gear and a lot of time on his hands announces that he has discovered Atlantis. I agree that the discovery of an ancient city built by Poseidon and inhabited by a race of magical superhuman citizens with advanced technology would be newsworthy. But these stories always turn out to be little or nothing to get excited about once the facts come out. However, this doesn't mean that the ruins of the Atlantis that Pluto wrote about are not out there beneath the waves somewhere, awaiting discovery. No one doubts that the oceans are filled with spectacular archaeological sites awaiting discovery. I once interviewed Robert Ballard, the person who discovered the Titanic, and he is absolutely giddy over the archaeological treasures yet to be found. However, if there really was an Atlantis, and if someone really does discover it one day, I'm pretty sure that it will not prove anything other than a natural disaster caused an ancient city to slide into the sea. It might remind us about the need to have tsunami early warning systems, but it won't prove any of the supernatural claims made by the more colorful Atlantis believers. The confirmed existence of the true Atlantis would not be enough to prove that Poseidon is a real god. Okay, if an underwater archaeologist surfaces above the sunken city in possession of a glowing trident that regenerates amputated limbs, has the cure for cancer engraved on its shaft, and projects a hologram of Poseidon introducing himself to the 21st century, then yes, it would be a good indication that it is time to start building new temples to the god of the sea. Short of that, however, clay pot shards, marble columns, and a few beads won't prove anything about gods, although some believers would merely say they do. To be clear, I'm not necessarily against biblical archaeology, Islamic archaeology, Hindu archaeology, Buddhist archaeology, Mormon archaeology, or anyone else's archaeology. So long as it is honest and follows the same scientific methods of mainstream archaeology, dig away, I say. The more trowels in the dirt, the better. We all benefit from more knowledge about the past. I don't care anything about the beliefs of a particular archaeologist if they can teach me something about our shared past. However, I do think that belief-motivated archaeological efforts are inherently risky because the goal of supporting a particular conclusion will always threaten objectivity. The bias could lead archaeologists to exaggerate some discoveries and ignore others. The best believers can do is read carefully and think skeptically when they see reports about discoveries that seem to support the existence of their god. Is the new find really evidence of a god, or is it just another artifact left behind by ancient believers? Yo, what the fuck is this weed dude, bro? Do you want the money or not? Anyway, chapter 5. Only God can make me feel significant. Do you ever feel small and insignificant? There's not necessarily anything wrong with having those feelings occasionally. It can be a natural reaction to living on a big world in a very big universe. Being just one of billions of other people might also make it a challenge to feel special. The current global population is nearly 7 billion. Over the last 50,000 years or so, more than 100 billion humans have lived. That's a lot of people. It's no surprise that some of us might feel lost in the crowd. It gets worse. Consider the fact that you are not even you, at least not as much as you probably think you are. Every human body, including yours, is actually a complex ecosystem made up of about 10 trillion human cells, and also more than 100 trillion microbes. Weird as it seems, if you could conduct a census of the space your body occupies, you would find that what you think of as all you is actually mostly other life forms such as tiny arthropods, bacteria, viruses, and fungi. You are a minority in your own skin. But you are not only outnumbered, you are also tiny, very tiny. How small are we actually? Most humans today weigh less than 200 pounds and are less than 6 feet tall. Now, again, they're talking about most humans on Earth, not just Americans, motherfuckers. Compare that to our planet's mass, which is estimated at an intimidating 6,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000 kilograms. The Milky Way galaxy, our immediate neighbor, is 120,000 light years wide. A light year is the distance it takes light to travel in 1 year, or about 5,875,000,000,000 miles, something like that. Our galaxy contains more than 100 billion stars. Our universe probably contains more than 100 billion galaxies. It's anyone's guess as to how many planets there actually are. So much is going on out there without us that it can seem as if we are invisible, even non-existent. There are beautiful clouds of dust and gas called nebulae that are much larger than our entire solar system. Stars are born, stars die. Sometimes an entire galaxy smashes into another galaxy. And this is just in the observable universe. Some cosmologists think there may even be many more universes besides ours. Feeling tiny yet? Size and numbers are not the only potential sources of human insecurity. By the measure of time, we don't add up to much either. The universe is so old, 15 billion years, give or take a few billion, that we might think of ourselves as mayflies, enjoying nothing more than a brief afternoon in the sun. A long life for an individual human today is about 80 years. That's a fairly small slice of time on a planet that is 4.5 billion years old. It has been at least 7,000 years since we made the transition from the Stone Age to civilization. So many lives have come and gone in that period. Imagine all the dramatic events of those 7,000 years that we missed. Imagine all the interesting and beautiful people who died before our time. Wouldn't it be nice if something or somebody, maybe even a god, could make us feel important, relevant, and large? Maybe the God could even allow us to live forever. It sounds appealing. For some, the desire to feel important is sufficient motivation for them to seek out the comforting arms of a God, even if that God has never been shown to exist. But hope and desire should not be confused with certain knowledge about something. Many believers in many different societies say that believing in a God or gods makes them feel significant in a vast and intimidating universe. But this benefit from believing is not necessarily evidence for the existence of a God. It can easily be the believing alone, not a real God, that provides the reassurance. Many belief systems make a big deal about this issue of the significance of the individual. Religious leaders are well aware that people often feel overwhelmed and lost in the herd of humanity, so they are quick to offer a solution. Many Christian preachers, for example, talk about the quote-unquote book of life in which a God has written down the names of believers. Christians have told me that their God knew my name even before I was born. Obviously, this is a story that can make me feel special. But although having your name in a God's book of life may sound great, someone first should provide an explanation as to how we can know that such a book exists. Where is it? If it's up in a place called heaven that we cannot see, then how does anyone down here know about it? If the only source of information about this magical book is found in ancient writings by anonymous authors, then how can we believe with any confidence? Yes, the book of life, like the God themselves, may help believers feel special, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily exist. I can understand when believers say they feel good about a God who knows them and cares about them. I can imagine how such a belief might allow some to cope with a life a little better. But there's another way, trust me. Everyone does not have to believe in Allah, Yahweh, Jesus, Ganesha, Vishnu, or other gods to feel significant. We can be happy, we can feel important, and lead meaningful lives without gods. Hundreds of millions of non-believers around the world manage to do it every day. One does not necessarily have to look any further than family, friends, and the joy from being productive or creative to find satisfaction and purpose in life. These real things can be so wonderful, in fact, that I wonder why anyone else would ever want to take time away from them in order to worship a God who has not yet been proven to even exist. Believers might consider the possibility that every minute spent thinking about and talking to gods up in the sky is a minute wasted down here. Believing in an unproven God may offer some level of comfort, but it certainly is not the only way to feel a connection to something bigger than yourself. Besides, it's not really so hard to confront the intimidating reality of our place in the universe. It's possible to meet it head on by embracing the power and mystery of it all, rather than shrinking from it. For example, when I was writing the opening paragraphs of this chapter, describing a universe that is billions of years old and billions of light years wide, I didn't feel overshadowed, overwhelmed, or intimidated. I felt excited and inspired. I love living in a universe that is outrageously big. Anything less would feel claustrophobic. One does not have to be left feeling cold, hollow, or depressed by the realities of time and nature. Don't bow down and cower in the immense shadow of this universe. Stand up and claim your place in it. Be the opposite of those who glance up at the night sky and feel small. Look up and be a giant because you are part of it all. Bars. Furthermore, you are special because as a thinking and creative life form, you are one of the most fortunate collections of atoms in all the universe. I'm convinced this dude don't want the weed money. Anyway, chapter 6, atheism is just another religion. Some believers charge that atheism is just another religion. Atheism requires faith, like any traditional religion, they say. It takes more faith not to believe in a God than to believe, which is a common quip these days. Some believers even claim that atheists worship humans and look to science as their religion. These are strange but surprisingly common claims. I've heard them many times. Some believers apparently find it difficult to comprehend the existence of people who are not convinced that any gods are real. The weirdest thing about calling atheism a religion is that some people say it as if it's an insult. I know they don't mean it that way, but it sounds a lot like, you atheists are silly as we are. That aside, believers need to be aware that declaring atheism to be a religion does not help the case for the existence of a God. Whatever atheists may or may not be has no bearing on whether or not gods exist. Therefore, labeling atheism a religion is no justification for believing in a God. By the way, no atheist thinks Charles Darwin, Carl Sagan, or anybody else is a god. If they did, they wouldn't be atheists. They would be believers. I suspect that many people who believe in a God are eager to call atheism a religion because thinking of it that way makes it more comfortable for them to deal with. Then it becomes just another rival belief system, easily dismissed as a mistake and ignored like all the rest. But atheism is more challenging when it is seen by the believer for what it really is, the absence of belief in gods. Atheism is not a religion. It is not an organization. It is not a club, a philosophy, a lifestyle, a tribe, a race, an ethnicity, or a team. Atheism is simply the absence of belief in a God. That is it. It doesn't even necessarily mean that one is certain that no God exists. It just means that he or she does not believe in gods. Some believers tell me that atheists think that they're smarter and better people than believers. Unfortunately, some atheists probably do think that. But the assumption that non-believers are superior to believers is simply wrong. Yes, less religious societies tend to be more law-abiding and peaceful than more religious societies. For instance, look at Canada versus United States, or France versus Pakistan, or Sweden versus Nigeria, for example. And yes, there are studies that show a decline in religious belief as education levels go up. But any random individual atheist is not necessarily morally or intellectually superior to any random individual believer. I do understand, however, why some atheists might feel a twinge of superiority when they see images in the news of blood-soaked Shia Muslims flailing themselves with chains and cutting themselves with knives while chanting and parading. Hindus stabbing swordfish bills and other objects through their cheeks during a religious festival, and Christians allowing nails to be hammered into their bodies in gruesome crucifixion reenactments. But an atheist would be wrong to ever assume blanket superiority based only on the absence of belief. Intelligence and morality at the individual level can't be predicted based only on the presence or absence of belief. There's too much variation to generalize. Belief is just one ingredient in the complex recipe that makes up an individual's life. When believers charge that atheism is just another religion, I question them about what they think a religion is. In fairness, it's not an easy thing to define. Anthropologists are aware of so many beliefs and rituals in so many cultures that they know better than to make a narrow definition of religion, because inevitably it would have too many exceptions. So they end up defining religion very loosely. Usually, anthropologists say something like, religions are behaviors and ideas that are an important part of a culture. With a weak definition like that, maybe the believers are right. Maybe atheism really is just another religion. But the astronomy club and the chess team could also be religions by that standard. Few non-anthropologists have any idea just how many varieties of religious beliefs there are today, much less in the past. It is staggering how productive we are when it comes to gods and religions. Humans have created millions of religions and confidently claim that countless gods exist, so many that we can't even define religion very well because every definition threatens to leave somebody out. So, is atheism a religion? No, it is not, at least not by the definition that people use outside of anthropology conferences. For most people, religion includes belief in a god, and atheism is by definition godless. Atheism is the absence of belief in gods. Most atheists don't seem eager to be united into an organization based on their absence of belief. I suspect that for many atheists, non-belief is just not an overriding concern in their lives. People have more important things to do than sit around discussing the unlikely existence of Thor and Odin. For example, I would probably list 20 or 30 personal attributes before I go down to atheism. I may care about how religious beliefs impact the world, and I may write about it, but I don't feel a need to dwell on being an atheist every day. It's just not that big of a deal. I'm far more interested in being a father, a husband, a friend, and writer than I am in being an atheist. There's a lot more to do in life than obsess over what you don't believe in. Some believers suspect that atheists like science a little too much. A few have accused me of making science my religion. Not all, but some non-believers may have a deep appreciation for science, but it doesn't mean they worship it or necessarily believe in it as some ultimate source of wisdom and guidance. Science, to me, for example, is simply the best method we have for figuring things out. That's as far as it goes. Science is not my surrogate god, as some believers charge. Science gave us napalm and the H-bomb, so in my eyes, it clearly is not a fountain of goodness that can do no wrong. I do not look to it to find personal meaning in life. It's not my mentor or guiding light. It is a tool. I think it is invaluable, irreplaceable, and inspirational, but still just a tool. Atheists do not worship humans as gods either, contrary to what many believers claim. This weird idea may have come from some believers' reaction to secular humanism. Secular humanism is a positive philosophy that promotes reason and ethics. It has no place for the supernatural because nothing supernatural has ever been shown to be real in all of history. Some believers viciously oppose secular humanism, calling it a terrible evil that threatens the world. Christian TV preachers routinely attack it. Some believers even make the outrageous claim that Hitler and Stalin were humanists, and mass murder is what you get when secular humanism runs its course. I find all of this fear and animosity toward humanism odd, since the American Humanist Association defines it this way, quote, "Humanism is a progressive life stance that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity." How does this line of thinking threaten the good people of plain Earth? The following are some examples of the Council for Secular Humanism. We are committed to the application of reason and science. We deplore efforts to denigrate human intelligence. We believe that scientific discovery and technology can contribute to the betterment of human life. We believe in an open and pluralistic society, and that democracy is the best guarantee of protecting human rights from authoritative elites and repressive majorities. We are concerned with securing justice and fairness. We attempt to transcend divisive parochial loyalties based on race, religion, gender, nationality, creed, class, sexual orientation, or ethnicity, and strive to work together for the common good of humanity. We want to protect and enhance the earth, to preserve it for future generations, and to avoid inflicting needless suffering on other species. We believe in enjoying life here and now and in developing our creative talents to their fullest. We believe in the cultivation of moral excellence. We respect the right to privacy. Mature adults should be allowed to fulfill their aspirations, to express their sexual preferences, to exercise reproductive freedom, to have access to comprehensive and informed health care, and to die with dignity. We believe in the common moral decencies: altruism, integrity, honesty, truthfulness, and responsibility. Humanist ethics is amenable to critical, rational guidance. There are normative standards that we discover together. Moral principles are tested by their consequences. We are deeply concerned with the moral education of our children. We want to nourish reason and compassion. We are engaged by the arts no less than by the sciences. We are citizens of the universe and are excited by discoveries still to be made in the cosmos. We are skeptical of untested claims to knowledge, and we are open to novel ideas and seek new departures in our thinking. We believe in optimism rather than pessimism, hope rather than despair, learning in the place of dogma, truth instead of ignorance, joy rather than guilt or sin, tolerance in the place of fear, love instead of hatred, compassion over selfishness, beauty instead of ugliness, and reason rather than blind faith or irrationality. We believe in the fullest realization of the best and noblest that we are capable of as human beings. Now, why would anyone have a problem with those principles? Who can honestly say that secular humanists are bad people based on what they stand for? I know the knock against all things supernatural troubles believers, but I hope they can at least see that these are positive themes. Don't principles like these offer us a chance to improve our world? A much better chance than Sharia law or the laws of the Old Testament, for example? Whether one calls them members of a religion or not, isn't it obvious that people who are pushing optimism rather than pessimism, hope rather than despair, learning in the place of dogma, truth instead of ignorance, and reason rather than blind faith or rationality are on the right side of human progress? While I am not a card-carrying member of any humanist organization, I'm proud to say that I agree with their general attitude toward life and their goals for our world. They do not seem to be a group of people who would be likely to burn people alive for thinking differently or intentionally flying planes into buildings. They sound like the kind of people I wouldn't mind having as neighbors, actually. Having worked to make the case that atheism is not a religious belief, I will now confess that I have a secret belief about gods that I rarely talk about. It's sort of embarrassing because it's very similar to religious belief. I can't back it up with convincing evidence or overwhelming arguments, but it's there, rattling around in my head nonetheless. I believe there are no gods. There, I said it. I'm a believer too, sort of. I can't prove that my belief is true, and I freely admit that I may be wrong, and I will change my belief if I'm shown to be wrong. However, based on what I know about the creativity of the human mind and the complete lack of evidence or strong arguments to support claims about gods, I can't help but believe that all gods were invented and do not exist. I don't know this, and I can't prove it, but I do believe it. I just have a hunch that if gods were real, somebody would have come up with some evidence, or at least a really good argument for them by now. After all, we have discovered 3 billion-year-old fossils and identified galaxies far beyond our own. Surely we would have found some trace of gods by now if there were any. But we haven't. So, reluctantly, I find myself believing in their non-existence. This silly little belief is not my religion, however. I don't have a religion. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to pause right there because now we are on chapter 7, which is titled Evolution is Bad. That'll be a good one. So yeah, I'll do this one another day. But yeah, we just read chapters 6, 5, and 4 of Guy P. Harrison's 50 Reasons People Give for Believing in a God. And when we start up next time, we'll be at chapter 7, Evolution is Bad. Thank you, sons of bitches, for watching. And keep in mind, remember, there is no fucking gods, you fucking faith head pieces of shits. What's up, Michael Palmore? Good looking out on being one of my fucking, moderators or whatever. Terrell Dawkins, what's up? John Copeland Lowe. I see it was the OG Smoke Man up in this bitch. Zeke up in this bitch. Where is it? Elm Hondurfnyo. Don't hey, I don't, who else we got in this motherfucker? I think that was it. I don't know. Anyway, I'm about to get off this bitch. I appreciate y'all listening, and we'll be back next time with chapter 7. Holla at your boy.